Good morning and welcome. My name is Timothy Borch. I work as Assistant Director for Transfer Student Services in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions here at UC San Diego. And thank you for joining us this morning. This is our Community College in-service training for counselors as part of National Transfer Student Week here. And National Transfer Student Week is one of the most important weeks for us here at UC San Diego and for you, our community college partners. So we're grateful that you're with us, and we hope that today's webinar is informative. So just a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be available. And we'll put a link in the chat where you can find the recording in the coming days. Please utilize the Q&A feature to ask questions. So we have a number of colleagues. I'm joined by my colleagues Griselda, Violette, and Dave. And one of our goals for today is to get through as many questions, if not all the questions that you have regarding UC San Diego admission. And then finally, enable closed captioning via the live transcript icon. So definitely utilize that if that is something you would like to do. So next slide, please. And so what we'd like to do is break this presentation into a couple of different parts. And first of all, I just want to say that I recognize so many names of the attendees that are joining us today. So thank you. It's good to see your name, and thank you for being with us, and a lot of new names too, a lot of new faces, so to speak. And so we really appreciate all the work that you're doing out in the field, supporting prospective transfer students, and we acknowledge and celebrate your work. We can't do it without your partnership. So let's jump right in with the fall 2024 data. So by the numbers, we had a very successful admission cycle this past year, again, in partnership with our community college partners. We had over 22,000. You can see the number of applications, 22,500. We admitted 12,300 at an admit rate of 55%. So we provide that. That's a general overall admit rate. We don't have the data available to disseminate between different majors. Some of our more selective majors, of course, students are always very eager to find out, well, what was the admit rate last year? What are my chances of getting in and things of this nature? And so we know that the cohort every year, the applicant pool is different. The cohort is different. And so historical data is nice as a snapshot in time, but it doesn't tell the whole story. But we do want to provide some of that story. And so you can see here, the admit rate is 55%. For a university like UC San Diego, that's a wonderful admit rate to have. And I'll explain that a little bit further in the presentation. You can see the middle 50% GPA range. And I always like to stress that a student does not have to have a 3.45 just to get admitted to UC San Diego, of course. But we want to make sure that students understand and counselors understand that for some majors, it is more competitive than others. For our arts and humanities, social behavioral science majors, and other majors as well, those majors, for a California community college student, as long as they have at least a 3.0, they would be competitive. Now, we're not saying that's a guarantee, but they would be competitive. And of course, there are other variables like the quality of the applicant pool and the number of applications we receive, and so on and so forth. So it's always interesting. We also get a lot of questions about appeals, and students, sometimes they would like their appeal to go through, of course, and the appeal is really just, it's sort of a last resort, and very few appeals get approved, as you can see based on this data here. So we received 112 and 12 were actually approved. So the appeal process, a student should not be advised to put all their eggs into a basket. If they're passionate about coming to a place like UC San Diego, if they don't get admitted, yes, there is an appeal process. The appeal has to be based on new and compelling information. If for whatever reason their appeal is not approved, they can always reapply for the next year if that is in fact their goal. So we do say that a delayed goal is not a denied goal. And so the nice thing about transfer admission is if a student does not get in their first time or their second time, they can still continue to reapply. In fact, I know of a couple of cases, we review the applications every year, and I've seen several where the student has applied multiple times, not just one or two, but maybe in some cases I've even seen 3. So persistence definitely pays off, and we do look at academic performance. And so anyway, this is just a little snapshot of some of the numbers we had in this past cycle. And I do also want to preface again, please use the Q&A if you want to jot some questions down there. We'll have Dave and Violette and Griselda support that, and then we will have time for question and answer at the very end for sure. Next slide. So I want to go over just very briefly. Some of you are experienced and seasoned community college counselors. Others are newer to the profession perhaps, but transfer admission criteria. So we'd be remiss if we didn't go through this, even if it's not very short. So students should have a competitive GPA based on the applicant pool. For UC San Diego, we do require students to have 60 UC transferable semester units completed by the end of the spring term prior to fall admission. The example we'll use for this webinar is for spring. So for fall 2025 admission, so the student would have to have the 60 units finished by the end of the spring of 2025. That's the important point there. And then be in good standing their last regular term. That's also something that we're looking for here at UC San Diego. I should point out too that if it's a UC intercampus transfer, and we know that it's not uncommon for a student to start off at a UC and for whatever reason they leave that UC and then they start at a community college and then they want to apply to UC San Diego if it's from another UC. And so they do have to be in good standing at their original UC campus. So every year we do see some examples where a student started at a UC, they didn't do so great for whatever reason. They started at a community college, they did great. And then they apply to UC San Diego, but they're not in good standing at their original UC campus. And unfortunately, they're not going to be eligible for admission. So just word of the wise, if you see that when that case comes across your desk or you're meeting with a student, always ask if they're in good academic standing at their original UC, because that is going to play an important factor. Next slide, please. Please note, so there was a little note there, and that's fine. So no, thank you. So the GPA is calculated through the end of the fall. So when we do the admission GPA calculation, we are looking at the end of the fall term. So in the example that we're using, fall of 2024. So at the end of this semester, students or quarter, we have a couple of community colleges, of course, on the quarter system, but at the end of this fall term, that's what we're looking at when we're calculating the UC GPA for admission purposes. Now, of course, students still have to submit their TAU, their transfer academic update. We'll talk a little bit about that also in a few moments. And so when they submit their TAU, the priority deadline for that is January 31st. We will have their fall grades. Therefore, we can calculate the GPA through the end of the fall term. The application this year is extended a couple of days to December 2nd. And of course, in many cases, the grades aren't going to be ready by December 2nd. So the TAU is a critical piece for our transfer students applying for admission. Next slide, please. Thank you. Part 2. So we are looking for the 7-course pattern. That's a very important aspect of this transfer admission process too. So the 7-course pattern is comprised of 2 English composition courses, at least 1 math course. Now, depending on the major, they might be required to complete more than 1 math course. And then 4 courses from at least 2 of the following areas: arts and humanities, physical biological sciences, social behavioral sciences. So the 7-course pattern is a nice general breadth pattern. To get to the 60 units, if a student is starting off from scratch, it's usually between 20 and 22 courses, roughly speaking. That's not including any AP exam or IB exam credit or even A-level exam credit. So the 7-course pattern is just a smaller piece of that puzzle. Now, if a student is on the IGETC track, IGETC Intersegmental General Education Transfer Curriculum, IGETC at the community colleges, the 7-course pattern is really embedded in there, but just make sure that they have taken UC transferable courses, especially in the English. I get the area 2, or the English critical thinking area. Make sure, because in some instances we have seen that they might get IGETC certified, but they don't actually have an appropriate course to take. So that's something I want to point out. Now, before we get to the next screen, I do like to. This photo here is a real photograph of one of the very, very famous pieces of our Stuart Art collection, Fallen Star. And so this shot is really, we like to show this. That's on top of Jacobs Hall. That's an actual house. Nobody lives there, but it is open to the public. It's a piece of art. It's a furnished house, and it's on a skew. So it's a very interesting, it's part of that eclectic Stuart Art collection, which is very, very famous on our campus. Next slide, please. For international students, we are looking at English proficiency as well. We'll talk about major preparation in a few moments, but English proficiency for international students, they must earn at least a grade of B or higher in both of their UC transferable English composition courses, okay? If they don't, if they say, let's say the student earned a C in one course and a B in the next course, those are passing grades, of course, but they still need to demonstrate English language proficiency, and they can do that by taking either the TOEFL or the IELTS or the Duolingo exam. And so we'll have one of my colleagues put in the chat on our website, the UC San Diego admissions website. There's an international tab, and that international tab breaks down even further the English language proficiency requirements. So you have that at your fingertips, but it is important. So please be aware that students are expected to satisfy that. As international students are expected to satisfy that as well. Thank you. Next slide, please. Senior standing. So a student will be in senior standing. So UC San Diego admits students that are in junior level standing, and that's not based on duration. It's based on units completed. So if a student is attending a California community college, there's never a danger of being in senior standing. So the only time senior standing could potentially be a factor is if they've attended a four-year university, and at that four-year university have completed upper division coursework, or they've attended a UC campus. So what happens is we will limit lower division credit at 70 units, basically 70 units, and that's what we limit the credit as. But remember, students can still get subject credit beyond the 70 units. So for instance, there's no penalty if a student has attended a California community college, and I'll just use, I saw a couple of my colleagues from Palomar College are on the call. So if they're from Palomar College and they've taken 150 units, that's fine, no problem. We will use 70 units toward their degree. 70 units will be used for their bachelor's degree, but they can still satisfy subject credit beyond the maximum of 70 units toward their degree. When the student has taken four-year university coursework, upper division level, or they're at a UC campus or they're transferring from a UC campus, you have to be careful. That's when if they've taken 20 units, 20 semester units or more of upper division coursework, or UC coursework goes toward the total, then they're in senior standing. Now, we don't see a lot of this from year to year, but definitely every year there are a couple of cases. And so this is something to be aware of. And of course, if you have any questions when you're meeting with students, there'll be a slide at the very end, how to get in touch with us. We're available to help guide you through any kind of tricky or challenging advising appointments and things of this nature. So we're always happy to help, but senior standing is definitely something to be on the lookout for. Next slide, please. The unit, so this again is speaking a little bit about the maximum transfer credit limitation, 70 units, 70 semester is equal to 105 quarter units of lower division credit. The lower division units beyond the maximum, they will be granted subject credit. So whether that's they're up to the 70 unit mark and then they take a calculus 3 course or whatever the example might be. So now keep in mind, this is an important distinction that units earned through AP, IB, or A-level exams are not included in the limitation. So that gives students even additional space to take some of those additional courses at the community college. There is a nice, and perhaps one of our colleagues, my colleagues can drop in the chat, the UC San Diego AP chart. So we have a really helpful AP chart where you can determine in working with your students where their AP credit will exist in terms of exemptions for courses at UC San Diego. So there are times when a student has taken an AP exam, they score a certain score on that exam, they're exempt from the UC San Diego course and then whatever that equivalent course or articulated course would be at the community college. So you want to avoid that. That could present a duplication problem, and we wouldn't award credit for both a passing AP exam and then the corresponding course for which there is an exemption. That's an important thing to consider as well. Next slide, please. So we have 160 majors at 8 academic schools, and you can see we have some selective majors on our campus, all the majors in the School of Biological Sciences, all the majors in the Jacobs School of Engineering, minus 2 majors, structural engineering and nano engineering. So those are not actually considered selective. But historically, all of our engineering majors have been selective. Before we changed the term to selective, it was capped. Some universities use the term impacted. We don't use that term because all of our majors are open, and we no longer use the term capped because they are open for all of our transfer students, so we say selective. What that means is in data science and public health round out the selective major areas. So there's more interest than there is available space, so we call those selective majors. The general rule is the higher the GPA, meeting the minimum requirements for admission, of course, the higher the GPA, the better the chances of gaining admission for that particular major. And you can see, and thank you for dropping that link in the chat, We do have 8 academic schools, and there are some new majors that we want to highlight, specifically artificial intelligence. We have a lot of interest in that. That's a computer science major. Cinematic arts is something we're very proud of here. The arts and humanities here at UC San Diego, lots of great arts and humanities programs, and cinematic arts is just another new addition along with literary arts. And then media industries and communication, which is part of our communications department. We were very fortunate in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions to hear from our colleagues in the communications department earlier this summer, and they provided some really insightful information. And that major, just they're very excited about it, and I think students are going to be thrilled that we have that on our campus. And then, of course, some new structural engineering specializations as well. Our Jacobs School of Engineering continued to expand their offerings to stay in touch and to stay current with what's happening in private industry and academia and otherwise. Next slide, please. There is an optional portfolio review for music, theater, and dance and visual arts majors. And so that's something that's very important to be aware of for the portfolio review. Again, it's optional for these majors, although it does help for students. They have an opportunity to showcase their work, whether that is a video of a performance or an audition, or maybe it's a piece of writing, or maybe it's a piece of music. But our arts departments, music, theater, and dance, and visual arts specifically, they do have that portfolio option for students, and we encourage students to take advantage of that. Next slide. So transfer major preparation. So this is another key part. So we talked about the admission requirements, junior level standing, which is 60 units by the end of spring prior to fall admission, competitive GPA, 7-course pattern. This is number 4, and this is a big one. Completion of minimum transfer major preparation. So the majors that are delineated on this slide do require completion of minimum major preparation. So you can see the majors that are listed here. Some of those majors are also selective majors. In fact, all of our selective majors are listed on this slide, but there are some other majors that are not considered selective. But the department would like for students to complete minimum major preparation so that they are ready to begin when they get to UC San Diego. The purpose of doing minimum major preparation before a student gets here, twofold. One is to ensure that they're prepared, they have a strong foundation, so when they get to UC San Diego, they'll be ready to jump into their upper division coursework. That's important. And 2, it does help with time to degree. When a student gets to UC San Diego, having the major preparation completed, depending on whether they've completed minimum all the way up until in the entirety of the major preparation, it can shorten its students' time to degree while they're at UC San Diego. And that's important for our students as well. This is a reminder, prospective community college students should consult assist.org and the UC San Diego website for additional information. The URL is here. Thank you for dropping that in the chat. So I know there is sometimes students are asking, and sometimes counselors, well, what's the difference between what's on Assist versus what's on our website, which is what's listed here? And the difference is on Assist, it has all the major preparation in its entirety. What's articulated, what articulated courses have we identified? On our website here, this is basically indicating the minimum requirement for admission to the major. So one example I like to present is biology. Biology is a very popular major. It's a selective major, selective department here, School of Biological Sciences. There's a distinction between minimum major prep and overall major prep, and that distinction is this. For minimum major preparation, a student would have to complete our Build 1 and 3 series, general biology, it's cell biology and evolutionary biology. And then they also have to complete the entire general chemistry series with lab, and then calculus 1 and 2. So those are the minimum screening courses for a biology major for UC San Diego. Now, if you were to go to Assist, of course, it delineates those courses, but it also delineates further that organic chemistry and physics are also considered major preparation. So if a student would like to really maximize their time at the community college, whether that's they have family responsibilities, work responsibilities, cost savings, they can complete all the major prep at the community college, and then they can transfer to UC San Diego, apply to transfer and kind of time that so it works that way. Or if a student is not in that boat where they really want to try to get to a place like UC San Diego as quickly as they can, then they're only required to complete the minimum major preparation. So that is the primary distinction. Keep in mind that assist.org is a key resource. Our articulation officer, Sam Zia, amazing, does an amazing job at keeping Assist updated. He's a he's a master of assist.org. And so definitely utilize Assist to make sure that you're following the right articulated courses. Next slide, please. Again, transfer major preparation. This is just reinforcing the importance of transfer major preparation. Students planning to transfer must complete the minimum major preparation coursework to be considered for admission into the major. UC San Diego does not admit transfer students undeclared, so they must declare a major on their application. Now, the nice thing is students can declare a first choice major and an alternate major. So I also want to just point out this on the slide. It says applicants for the departments listed on the website will be screened for the number of preparatory courses. And that was the website we just showed you that was popped in the chat. So the minimum screening courses, again, using that biology example, the build 1 and 3, the general chemistry, and the calculus 1 and 2. And so those are definitely important distinctions. And so if a student is planning to come to UC San Diego, they do have to select a major. They can select an alternate major as well. And if their first choice major is a selective major, or if it's a screening major, a major that's screening for minimum major prep, their alternate major, we would we only recommend that their alternate major not be a selective major, and that if it is a screening major, that they also have the minimum major preparation satisfied for that alternate major. So it's very appropriate if a student wants to list their first choice major, if it's a selective major. In fact, that's what we recommend. For instance, if a student is a computer science major and they want to study computer science, they should list that as their first choice major. However, to maximize their chances of getting into UC San Diego, it's our recommendation that they select an alternate major that's not selective. And so sometimes that can be tricky. A student might be just very passionate about whatever subject they want to study versus coming to a specific university, or it might be on the flip side. A student really wants to come to UC San Diego and they're flexible or open to considering what major choices that they might consider. And so that's something to discuss with your students as you're counseling with them. Those are conversations we are having with students as well. Next slide, please. Here are some helpful transfer notes that we have. Advise students to complete major prep prior to transfer. Very important. Again, I'll probably even mention that a couple more times. We're really trying to reinforce that. We do see last year, we had a number of students that were applying and they did not have all the major prep completed for a number of reasons. And so we're really trying to just make sure when we're meeting with students, when we're in front of counselors, we want to just really stress how important that is. Applicants must submit the academic update in January. Again, that TAU, the Transfer Academic Update, that's UC-wide. So all students applying to the University of California, they must submit that TAU. Even if they're not taking any courses in the winter and or spring of 2025, they must submit the TAU. All they have to do if they're not taking any courses, if they've completed all their requirements through the end of the fall, they say, hey, I'm good to go. They still need to do that. If they don't, their application is really rendered as incomplete. So very important point. Now, keep in mind, a final note about that, students receive a lot of reminders about how to do it, when to do it. The TAU typically, historically opens mid-December. The priority deadline is January 31st. Although the TAU is open beyond that, the priority deadline for students to submit their TAU is definitely January 31st. And that should give students ample time to get their fall grades, have their fall grades, and then report those on the TAU. And then finally, applicants must report all courses completed. And this is a question we get a lot in the field. Everything that's college level should be reported on the application, even if they've repeated the course, even if they received academic renewal for the course, even if they withdrew from the course. If the course shows up on a transcript as a W, they should report that on their application for admission. One thing that is different between the community colleges, I know there are some different rules regarding withdrawals or Ws. For UC San Diego, the UC system in general, UC San Diego specifically, a W doesn't affect an application at all. So a student can have a lot of Ws, withdrew from courses over a period of time. It really does not affect their application at all. And that's something to really be aware of. We need to see what the student has done. Next slide, please. The fall application cycle. So the application opens August 1st every year. And so students must update their application in January, again, via the TAU, with their fall grades and confirm the classes they're taking in the winter or spring. Now, remember, the admission notifications for transfer at UC San Diego go out end of April. And so when we send out those notices, the spring term is not over yet. So a student has to report on their application what they're planning to take. And so we can calculate, okay, how many units the student will have based on their GPA through the end of the fall term. And based on all those other factors like completion of major prep, completion of the 7-course pattern, then a student is offered admission. So, or they're not offered admission. But if they're offered admission, it's always at that point, and we notify students that it's provisional and that they do have to complete everything on their application that they said they were going to do in order to maintain that admission. So in the summertime, and we see this happens from time to time where a student will drop a class from the spring, or maybe they failed a course. The contract for admission is very clear. It's provisional. It's congratulations, you've been admitted. However, you still have to do X, Y, and Z, and you have to send in all your official transcripts so that you can demonstrate that you did X, Y, and Z during the time period that was required. And so very, very important. And so you can see any technical support, and students see this on their application. The help information on the application really makes it a very user-friendly tool for students. Students who are very tech savvy, all the way down to students who are not as tech savvy. And so technical support is definitely available, whether the student wants to contact them via email or phone. Especially this time of year, the application center, they've got a lot of staffing support. They know that they're going to expect a lot of questions all the way up until December 2nd. And of course, we know that historically, we always tell students, don't wait till the last day to get your application in. But we know they run the data every year. They share it with us. And it's usually, I believe, between 85 and 89% that submit their application within the last 24 hours. I believe that is the data that I understand, or maybe it's the last 36 hours, but it's really a lot. And so we encourage students not to wait till the last minute to submit their application. In case something comes up in their life that really prohibits them from doing so, there's no guarantee that a student will be approved to submit a late application to the University of California. Very important point. So anyway, thank you for reinforcing that message when you meet with students. We do want to talk a little bit about many of the transfer resources that support our transfer students on campus. These are just a very small, this is just a sliver of the pie in terms of what we offer for transfer students. Our Student Veterans Resource Center, which provides peer support, mentoring, pre-professional networking, and much, much more to our entire military connected population and any student. You don't have to be military connected or identify as military connected. The SVRC, as we call it, is open to all students. Transfer student organizations are available on campus too. The Triton Transfer Hub, which is a key partner with us here in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, they provide a lot of support. They're with us in the field too when we have programs. We had our fall showcase open house program a couple weeks back, and they had a very strong presence, and they continue to have a strong presence throughout the recruitment cycle. And then also during the yield period in the spring, when we notify admitted students, transfer students who are admitted, we invite them back to campus, and the Triton Transfer Hub is with us every step of the way, letting students know that we celebrate their hard work and that we want them to consider UC San Diego. And we have a lot of resources to make sure they have a great experience. And then finally, the Transfer Year Experience Program, a 2-unit course to help transfers optimize their college experience. Very similar in many ways to the course that many of the community colleges offer, where it's either between a 1 and 3-unit counseling course that kind of helps them to get assimilated to the community college. And then now we offer a very similar type of course at UC San Diego, the Transfer Year Experience Program course. And that's something we would encourage students to explore as an option as well. Next slide, please. Campus housing update. So we do offer an on-campus housing for transfer students for 2 years. This is a nice rendering of the brand new towers that just went up. I walk by them every day I come into the office. So this is our Pepper Canyon towers that you can see. And I believe they're at UC San Diego, some of our towers, some of the residence hall towers now are some of the tallest buildings actually in the La Jolla area. But some of our students have a really nice view, as you can kind of glean from this particular shot. So lots of living spaces, some inclusive living and learning communities on campus, the 2-year housing guarantee. And so we also offer on-campus housing for families, for students who have families, whether it's dependents or otherwise. And then there are a community of transfer and upper division students on campus as well. And a lot of commuter options too. So we know not every student is going to want to live on campus. And so there is definitely opportunities for students who are driving in or coming in on the trolley to connect with other students and to really be a part of our community here at UC San Diego, even if they choose not to live on campus. One final point, dining options. So there are a lot of dining options on campus. And so we have a lot of restaurants. We call them restaurants and dining halls. They're not cafeteria. They're really restaurant and dining hall style. all kinds of options, whether it's halal, kosher, vegan, organic, and more. The Triton To Go app for quick service meals as well. So it really caters to our students who are really working on their academics, working on internships, working on getting ready to study abroad, and then finally graduating and finding that job, that first job out of college, or maybe going on to graduate school, or if it's a returning student, maybe going back into the workforce or going into academia in a brand new line of area. So housing on campus is really something that we really enjoy here at UC San Diego. And there's more housing going up, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few moments. Next slide. Campus highlights. So here it is. So the campus transformation is underway. It has been for many years. It really started during the pandemic, and it's gone on since. In fact, right behind our office here, they're building the Triton Center, which is a brand new center, and that's going to be online in 2026. And you can see some other notes here. The School of Computing and Information and Data Science is online. Our Price Center Plaza recently went through a complete remodel. If you haven't been on campus in a while, it's really nice over in the Price Center. The Theater District Living and Learning Neighborhood, that opened up this fall, and so we're really excited about that. 8th College is also in that part of town, or that part of campus. Ridgewalk North Living and Learning Neighborhood, another major project that's underway right now. And so it's really being transformed, and it's really being transformed for the better. Lots more opportunities for students to live on campus, to really make this campus community whole. It's whole, but it's expanding. And being in La Jolla, we're very fortunate to be where we're at because we're very close to the Pacific Ocean. We have our Scripps Institution of Oceanography, of course. And so we're really ideally located. And then you can see here, 8th College will begin admitting transfer students for this coming cycle. Quick plugs for our counselor site. You can sign up for more information if you go to admission.ucsd.edu/counselors. And then webinar programs. We still have some more webinar programs happening throughout the month of November. Check it out. Definitely promote this to your students. Counselors are welcome to join us as well. We want to try and get as much information out to the public as we can so that students feel connected and well informed. And this is a rendering of what the Triton Center, part of the Triton Center, is going to look like. So as you can see, it's really looking pretty good. Next slide. Connect with us, definitely. We have our admissions.ucsd.edu/visit campus tours throughout the year. There's also a virtual tour. Connecting and finding opportunities to see what the campus looks like is something we highly recommend. Another great resource, especially if you want to really kind of get into the weeds with regard to curriculum or faculty or things of this nature, our catalog, catalog.ucsd.edu. I highly recommend getting that in your browser and just making it a favorite for you, as you're working with students. I know I currently check out, or I very frequently reference the catalog course descriptions, curriculum program, things of this nature. It's a very helpful resource. And then finally, and this is a great resource as well, the University of California Office of the President, they have a number of resources on their website, including the Quick Reference Guide. Hopefully all of you are at least familiar with the UC Quick Reference Guide. That's a resource that comes out historically every August. They update the guide. It's for all things first year and transfer admission, whether it's recruitment in the fall or yield or even selection, and then everything in between. It's a great resource. Definitely want to have that available so that when you're meeting with students, you can have all that information at your fingertips, and we'll make sure that's also dropped in the chat as well. Next slide, please. And so that's a lot of information in a very short period of time, and we try to cover some of the key highlights, but we definitely want to try and get to some of the questions that are out there as well. And so we have plenty of time for question and answer. And I'm going to the Q&A, and I want to thank again Violette, Griselda, and Dave to handling some of these questions. And so what we want to do is I'm going to take some of these questions that are in the Q&A, and we'll go from there. So
Thanks,
the first
Timothy. I did want to let you know the first question that if you could address is, do you use the PIQs for admission purposes?
Oh, that's a great question. And thank you for that question, Griselda. And so the answer is, and this is a great plug for the Quick Reference Guide. And so the Quick Reference Guide has, I believe I'm drawing a blank on the page number, but there's a page number in the Quick Reference Guide that says, how do the different UC campuses use the PIQs for transfer admission? And so students are required to complete 4 PIQ statements. We call them personal insight questions, or PIQs for short. One is required, and that's specifically about the student's major. and then 3 additional questions that vary depending on, there are a total of 8. 1 is required, and then they have to choose 3 of the remaining 7. The other questions deal with things like challenges that students have overcome, leadership opportunities, things of this nature. And so students should be thoughtful and thorough in their PIQ responses. Now, for UC San Diego specifically, we look at academic performance and meeting minimum eligibility requirements for admission. Those are the key factors we're looking at. Now, if an admissions officer needs to get more information about a student, they can go to that PIQ, their PIQ section, or the student's PIQs, or even the additional comment section. But primarily for UC San Diego, what we're looking at is academic performance and meeting minimum eligibility. So that's a great question, and we'll try and get that. Thank you, Violette, very much. So that page 48 of the quick reference guide, and that's a great piece of information to have handy. And you'll see, interestingly enough, most of the UCs on that page indicate no. And so thank you for that great question, Griselda. And if Griselda, are there other questions, or should I just start taking the questions?
There are a lot of good questions. Thank you very much, counselors, for dropping those in. Timothy, can you please let us know, how do students get back into good standing at UC? Do they need to stay and bump up their GPA for a good standing instead of going to the community college? Or can you please provide us a couple more details on that?
Thank you for that excellent question. And that is a great question. So it's really a 2-step process. Well, before we get into the 2-step process, let me say that student is welcome to go to a community college. Sometimes circumstances in their life might indicate that going from a UC where they are not in good academic standing and go to a community college might be just what the doctor ordered to help them build up their confidence, or maybe get closer to home, or whatever the case might be. But in the end, they do have to follow the 2-step process. That being, 1, they have to work with their home campus. Whatever that UC campus is, they have to work with that campus to figure out what they need to do to be in good standing. Historically, they need to complete 12 units, and they need to be in good standing in those 12 units. But what I do recommend is that advising students to connect with their home campus to find out what, if anything else, they should be aware of. That's what we typically do when we connect with students here at UC San Diego. We say, okay, it's okay. You're not alone. Definitely, it's not uncommon for a student to be not in good academic standing. And there are a lot of reasons why, but they do have to resolve that at their home campus. That's the important point. Even if a student does really well, and a lot of students do really well, when they get to the community college after that original UC experience, unless they're in good standing at that original UC campus, they're not going to be eligible, no matter how good of a student they are at the community college. So that is really the key. But historically, it's 12 units, but definitely make sure that they check in with their original UC, and that's usually their records office or registrar's office, or maybe even their college, whatever their college or their academic department advisor. And so definitely, and they shouldn't wait till the last minute to try and do that. Unfortunately, there's no way that we're not going to know about that for a student. So a student hopefully understands that transparency is really important. I know we did the application workshop last night, but students need to report everything on their application. And if they're at a UC and they didn't do so well, they're not alone, but they definitely have to report that on their application. I hope that helps a little bit.
Thanks, Timothy. Will Cal GETC be considered for next transfer admissions?
That's a great question too. And I know there's a little blurb in the quick reference guide for Cal GETC. Cal GETC, of course, is a community college curriculum. It's not a UC curriculum. And so it goes into effect starting 2025, 2026 for students starting at community college next year. So at some point, yes, of course, students will be doing Cal GETC. In fact, it's in the quick reference guide. I'll read exactly what it says on page 36. The use of the Cal GETC general education pattern is intended to begin with students matriculating at a California community college in the 2025-2026 academic year. More information about Cal GETC is available on the ICAS website. So the community colleges manage that particular program. We will receive it, of course, but we're still waiting to hear back how the Cal GETC will be in terms of satisfying lower division GE and all of these types of factors, but we still have a little bit of time. It goes into effect starting next fall, and then that would really affect students coming in the following fall, if they're potentially the following fall, or if not, the fall after that. So it's a little bit more of a long term, but the Cal GETC, it's coming, and so we definitely have to be ready for it.
Thanks, Timothy. So if you could please clarify for fall 2025 admissions, do the math and first English course need to be completed by fall 2024?
No, they don't. They don't. For regular admission to UC San Diego, no. The math and English can be completed by the end of the spring of 2025. So the question is for fall 2025 admission, they can complete all the admission requirements up through the end of the spring, but we don't recommend that. So there are 2 English composition courses that a student needs to complete unless they already have an AP exam with a passing score, an IB exam. They need to have 2 English composition courses. So waiting until the end is not a strategy we recommend, and definitely not recommend waiting until the last semester to complete a math course. Typically, those are students that either they're not strong in math or they don't like math. And so they really kind of wait and wait and wait. And if they get admitted and they report on their application that they're doing pre-calculus in the spring or statistics in the spring and they don't pass it, their admission is subject to cancellation. So the best strategy is getting them in that math course before the last semester, before admission. So in case they don't pass it, they have another opportunity to repeat the course and that way maximize their chances and not having to deal with having an admission canceled and then having to go through a potential appeal process. We don't want students to go through that. So we do know that students will do that, and that's okay as long as all the requirements are finished by the end of the spring. But again, we don't recommend waiting until the last semester to complete the English and math. Great question. They're all great questions.
Moving right along to these amazing questions, is it possible for a student to get IGETC certified but not have the 7-course pattern completed? If so, could you please let us clarify how does this happen?
That's a great question. IGETC is managed by the California Community Colleges. So IGETC is something that community college counselors will look at and certify. If the student took a course, maybe at a 4-year university, maybe they took an English composition course that is not considered UCE at the UC, but the community college might consider that to be the second course in the English for the IGETC area for critical thinking. So we accept the IGETC certification at the UC. So once the student is admitted, if they have an IGETC certification, we will post that they are IGETC certified for a transfer student. But it doesn't guarantee that every course on that IGETC certification is UC transferable. The example I used is, again, if the community college uses a 4-year university, student took a class maybe or a couple of classes, maybe they moved from Illinois or wherever. They attended the University of Illinois, for instance, down in Champaign-Urbana. They attend the University of Illinois, they took an English course at the community college, says, well, that looks like English composition. That is English composition for IGETC. But at UC, it might not be considered an English composition course. Maybe it's a creative writing course, which may very well be UC transferable, but not English composition. And so I hope that clarification helps. And again, if you run into any of these examples, definitely reach out to us here at the Office of Undergraduate Admissions. We're helped to try and troubleshoot anything. The tricky part the last part about this good question, the tricky part is there are no articulation agreements outside of the California Community College system. And so we cannot, in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, officially make a statement about whether a course will be UC transferable or not. We can provide counselors with guidance, but ultimately a student would have to apply for admission and then their application gets an official review. And then we would determine, the Office of Undergraduate Admissions would determine at that point whether a course is actually UC transferable or not transferable, and so on and so forth. So excellent question. I know you get that a lot in the field at the community colleges, so hang in there and keep us posted if we can be of any support.
Thanks, Timothy. The following questions are going to be regarding alternate majors. So do students get screened for alternate majors?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you, Griselda. If their first choice major is a screening major, we will be screening the alternate major as well. So by screening, I mean look for major preparation. So when a student submits their application for admission, the whole application is reviewed. We review to determine which courses are UC transferable, which courses are actually 7-course pattern, and which courses will satisfy minimum major preparation. So if their first choice major is a major that is screening for major preparation, we will also screen the alternate major if that alternate major is a screening major as well. So for instance, here's an example of when we don't do that. If their first choice major is communications, which is an excellent major, and their alternate major is computer science, we won't be screening alternate major computer science because their first choice major is not a screening major, nor is it a selective major. We will look to see if they meet overall selection to communication. So hopefully that example helps a little bit.
Thanks, Timothy. Are admitted transfer students able to switch majors after they have already started at UC San Diego?
Thank you for that question that we get quite a lot. The answer is maybe. So a couple of layers to that answer. One, for biology, a student must be admitted, for a transfer student, they must be admitted to the School of Biological Sciences. There are no options to come in as a continuing student. For instance, there's no opportunity for a communications major to come to UC San Diego and then try to switch their major to biology. Number two, for all of our selective majors, that process is managed by the academic department. And each academic department has their own process. The Office of Undergraduate Admissions does not manage that process. So the answer is it's possible, but for the more selective majors, like for instance, computer science, mechanical and aerospace engineering, those are probably the bioengineering. For those majors, the chances of getting in as a continuing student are probably less than if they were trying to get in as a regular admitted student. But some of the other majors, there might be more flexibility, for instance, public health perhaps, or even data science, although there's never a guarantee, and that's the important point. If a student is admitted to UC San Diego and they don't get their first choice major, although there is a possibility, depending on the department, minus the School of Biological Sciences, in most cases, it's fairly unlikely. And so in those instances, we do recommend that students consider other universities, apply broadly in the UC system, apply broadly to the CSU system as well. Of course, the 23 campuses in the California State University system and the 9 undergraduate campuses in the University of California system maximize their chances of getting into a university. And so that's probably the best way we can respond to that excellent question.
Thank you, Timothy. Following right along, counselors were under the impression that students only needed to report UC transferable coursework that is worth 3 or more semester units on the application and the TAU. Is that incorrect?
Well, that's an interesting question, Brisalda. Thank you for raising that. I appreciate that. That is incorrect. So a student needs to report everything on their application. For instance, a great example is a lot of the community colleges offer PE courses that are only 1 or 2 units. We will award PE credit for students up to a certain number. And there are also, in some cases, dance courses and other types of courses or lab courses that might only be 1 or 2 units. So students should report all of their college level coursework on the application for sure.
Thank you. Now, we did get a more specific question regarding a student a counselor is facing. A counselor met with a student who previously attended a university in the East Coast and completed 49 lower division units. She also has 3 units of an AP exam. She now wants to attend a community college with a change in major to electrical engineering. The major requires specific courses to be completed prior to the transfer, and the counselor is concerned that she will have excess units. Will she be considered in senior standing, and will this be difficult for her to be admitted at UC San Diego?
Boy, that is a good question. And those are the kind of questions we like when we're talking with counselors, because these are the real kind of questions that students need to know answers for. The answer to this is, it depends. And so let me kind of explain that a little bit. In this question, it says 49 lower division units. Okay, so that's good. And then 9 units of AP exam. So they took 1 AP exam, presumably, and they received 3 semester units for that. Most of the AP exam units at UC San Diego, most of them receive 8 quarter units. There are some that receive 4 quarter units. And of course, students would convert that from quarter to semester, which is dividing by 1.5. In this instance, the student would not be in senior standing because based on the question, it states that they completed 49 lower division units. So the only time senior standing becomes a question is if they've attended a 4-year university and at that 4-year university, they've completed upper division coursework. and or they've completed courses at a UC campus. Remember, the UC courses add on to the total. So if a student took classes at a summer session at Davis or maybe a summer session at Merced, those are things to be aware of. But in this instance, this student would not be in danger of senior standing no matter how many units they take at the community college, because according to this question, they did not take any upper division courses. So the answer to this question, they should be fine. Just make sure they take the right courses for electrical engineering through your community college, the screening courses.
Okay, we are coming to a close, so I think we'll take one more question. This is in reference to the question about the IGETC certified, but not the 7-course pattern completed. Does this mean the student will have to complete a course to fulfill that lower division GE English composition requirement, or that the units will not be counted, but the requirement will be fulfilled?
So that's a good question. When we certify IGETC, we basically show that the student has certified the lower division requirements for 7 of the 8 colleges at UC San Diego. Now, remember, for UC San Diego, each one of our colleges does require between 1 and 3 upper division courses, and those are typically writing courses. So the student would still need to take some kind of writing course depending on which college they get into here at UC San Diego. But we simply accept the IGETC certification from the community college. The 7-course pattern in and of itself does not, we don't go and look course by course in the 7-course pattern when they actually get to UC San Diego to determine what kind of writing courses they might have to take at the community at UC San Diego. Remember, the writing courses that are required for general education at UC San Diego are typically upper division. And so regardless of what they do at the lower division at the community college, when they get to UC San Diego, depending on their college, they're still going to need to take some writing courses. But it is advised for a student to take UC transferable courses as part of IGETC. That is definitely advised. The example I provided is a pretty rare example. In most cases, students, when they are looking at transferring, they're taking the right type of courses. Now, many four-year universities outside of California specifically don't have a nice, clear curriculum like we do in the California Community College system, where it's like English composition, English 101, and then English 201, which might be critical thinking and writing, or I know in some instances it's English 101, English composition, and then English 102, English composition 2, or whatever the series might be. Some of the colleges out there, the four-year universities, don't have quite nice kind of system. And so it is important to be aware of that when you're meeting with students. But if there are any questions, you can always let us know. But IGETC, we don't certify. All we do is accept the IGETC. It's the community college's responsibility to certify that IGETC. So with that, thank you for all of these great questions. And with that, we're going to just start wrapping things up. So if you do have any further questions, definitely connect with us, contact us. Every community college has a liaison. We sent out a massive email campaign earlier in the year. Hopefully you were a part of that email campaign. We do know that there's turnover, of course, but if you have any questions, if there's anything we can do to support you, we want to help support you while you're out in the field. You can connect with us by going to our admissions website. You can see there's also the admissions.ucsd.edu/contact us form. That's a great way to connect with just general admissions, but working with your admissions officer, if you know who your admissions officer is, a great strategy as well. We are also open Pacific Standard Time, 9 to 4, depending on standard time and of course, daylight savings time, but we are available. In other words, we're available to help support counselors, to support students, and to support anybody who's interested in learning more about transfer admission to UC San Diego. And with that, we are going to wrap things up. Again, thank you for your questions. Thank you for joining us today on this, what is today? Thursday, on this Thursday afternoon. We know that the Halloween is next week and the end of the semester is coming up pretty soon in maybe 5 weeks. So if you have any questions, let us know. But most importantly, we appreciate all of the service you do for transfer students. We couldn't do it without your help and without your support. We look forward to seeing you in the field. We know we'll still be out at a couple of the community colleges up into early November. And if there's anything we can do to help support you, please let us know. With that, on behalf of the Office of Undergraduate Admissions and my colleagues, Griselda, Violette, Dave, and all of us here at UC San Diego, thank you. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you soon.